You know, every month there's things you can fail at when it comes to deer hunting, and especially during the season. Some of the biggest fails that we talk about are overpressuring stand locations beginning of the season. Not that you should pressure them anytime, but there's a lot of hunting seasons that are ruined in the first week because that's all it takes with a mature buck to spook them and not have them come back. When it comes to May, May is a huge habitat window, whether it's planting switchgrass, clover, pollinator blends, getting certain sprays in, timing your last spraying for switchgrass, your first spraying for food plots, making sure your trees are installed by that time. There's a lot that has to be done by May when it comes to timing wise. So we could just do the opposite of that with all your fails, but that's not what we're like. Check out the May deer hunting chores and see what we're doing to keep track of things. There's a lot to do in May, and a lot of them, again, have to do with timing. We're going to go a different route with this and to stay a little bit more hunting oriented, but we only have 3 of them. And when it comes to May and springtime in general, people can't wait to put minerals out. And we can discuss minerals. I mean, there's really no scientific evidence out there, no studies, even though people have tried, other than from mineral companies that show that minerals put inches and body weight and do good things for bucks. That's the sad, honest truth. Now, Dylan had a different perspective because he worked at a deer farm for about 1.5 years in Wisconsin, and really they grow some magnificent giant bucks. And I know, Dylan, I don't even know if it's a percentage we talked about in the past, but those deer ingest a lot of minerals every single day as part of their diet.
Right.
Completely different because it's controlled and it's in an enclosure, but that enclosure was big, wasn't it?
Yeah.
How many acres was
they
that?
Had several different ones. They had some smaller pens as well, but I mean, they had one called the 160. They had, I think, another one that was like 300 some acres.
Yeah.
And they had an 80, and so it was all different. But
yeah, a lot of them. So we're talking, decent sized acreage, but again, all in a fence, and so the diet of these deer were strictly controlled. So when they're feeding the minerals, Dylan, what do you think on an average basis, like per week, those deer would eat of minerals? And I guess it was feed too, so it's a combination of both. It'd be hard to.
Yeah, that'd be a really tough number to put together off the top of my head here. But I mean, we mixed their food right there on site, and a good portion of it was minerals, and just stuff to basically keep the deer healthy enough to put more into their bone structure, rather than just maintaining health and that.
And a lot of these were genetic freaks anyways.
Oh yeah, I mean, genetics are carrying those deer.
Yeah, at that point. Yeah, but the minerals were those last few percentage points. I mean, big difference even there when people are paying. When you talk about deer industry, the difference between a 165-inch buck and a 175-inch buck was, I would say, a huge price tag. Jumped into the boot. Let alone, can you imagine, I would imagine 195 versus 201, where they go above 200?
I think it was under 160, then 160 to like 190, 200, and then over 200 had its class, and then over that there was its own. Then it was almost by deer.
Yeah.
Per deer, kind of thing.
Yeah, so to get in that next category, if you could do that, meant something.
It was a very cool industry.
And so, but the point is that mineral in those controlled situations, they ate pounds of mineral per week, maybe even per day in some cases, who knows, but bottom line, it was a lot, way more than we're putting out in a salt block or some mineral that kind of stumps somewhere. So you could say, that's kind of a failure. You're putting this out thinking that in a free range deer herd, you're going to control the amount of inches that. And I've seen in mineral companies, it's a joke, where it'll be, this is before minerals, this is after minerals. And it's a difference of a 6-year-old buck versus a 2-year-old buck or a 1.5-year-old buck. It's just a joke, some of that marketing that's used. But bottom line is, when it comes to patterning bucks, people are using mineral blocks, mineral stations, water holes during the summertime, summer food sources to pattern bucks. And folks, all of that's gone for the most part. If they're in a summer area, even at water holes, that means they're probably not in that location during the fall. They need open timber. They need shaded timber during the summertime. A lot of times they want to be bug free, so they're not down in the swamps or up in the hardwoods adjacent to that location. They'll be in the swamps in the fall and winter. So they're 2 different habitats. Does, on the other hand, need thick cover all the time. Then they want those big open food sources, those food sources that might be average at best during the hunting season, but those does and fawns are still there because they're home bodies. A buck has a home range 5 times greater. That's why a lot of times we see a buck during the summer is 1 mile to 1.5 miles away from his fall range during the summer and vice versa. He leaves. Not to say he never goes back, but his fall core range is where it's most important. And so what we're doing to pattern bucks during the summertime is to consistently watch locations we hunt during the fall and make sure when a certain buck goes through, for one thing, we know that buck will be in that location again during hunting season a lot more frequently because they'll be on the land a lot more frequently. It also helps us identify target bucks for certain locations just to say, yeah, this is our inventory of bucks. When he comes through this, he's right in front of a stand location because we have mock scrapes on him. And he's going to remember that, imprint that in his head when he walks through that area late October. We're sitting in that stand with a bow and we hopefully pick the right stand location. We're helping patterning bucks, not by where they're at consistently all summer long, but where they infrequently and randomly go that gives us hints of their fall patterns later. Number 2, not addressing weeds. This is strictly switchgrass, food plots, pollinator blends. So critical, whether it's your last spraying for switchgrass and pollinators or your first spraying for food plots, you have to control the weeds. Now, maybe in your case, you're not spraying, you're disking and tilling. So maybe you're waiting more towards the end of May, early June. You get 8 to 10, 12 inches of weeds, and then you till, you disc. Then you do it again 4 weeks later. Do it again 4 weeks later, and then you plant. You set those weeds back adequately enough to have a good food plot. But if you're in hill country, if you're in areas that have dry soil, you just dried out the soil every time you disc it up and you opened up your land to erosion. There's always a balance with everything. You try to limit herbicides and at the same time limit erosion or eliminate it. Because if all your topsoil ends up down in the woods edge or off your plots in a hill country area, then it really doesn't matter what you had to till or disc or plant no-till in the future because you've spoiled your soil, you've dried it out, you've exposed and opened up that top layer over and over again, now never allowing that top organic matter to take place in those living organisms that are in that top inch soil of topsoil. Never allowed that to take place. You just keep mixing it over and over. And thinking about it, it takes, in normal conditions, it takes about 100 years to produce an inch of topsoil. Imagine if you keep taking that top 5 inches, 6 inches, 4 inches and mixing it all together. You never develop that solid top layer. And that's where you have that balance of chemicals, whether you believe in it or not. There's a lot of people out there ruining their land. Again, I'll bring it up again. We had a Michigan client last month that I went to personally that had an organic label on their farm. The neighbors were actually had a rental agreement to farm, so the farmer didn't really care which way it was, or the landowner. But the county pulled their certification of organic land away from them because it was hilly, and the county's looking out for the landowner and the landowners in the area because they're trying to make sure that they avoid erosion problems and lose topsoils in their water systems, and that's a bad thing too. And so they were constantly tilling, disking. They yanked their certification out because that's what you have to do to plant organic and to plant without chemicals. And the county deemed it necessary to pull that certification so that the landowner could ultimately protect his own topsoil. Kind of looking out for the landowner when they're not looking out for themselves, if that makes sense. Very critical to address weeds in May. When you wait till mid-June, a lot of times it's too late because you already have weeds that are 2 feet high. There's so much debris, it's hard to get seed down in the soil through them later, especially in no-till operations. Even with no-till, expensive no-till planters. You don't want to let those weeds. Your first spraying is always the most important, and that takes place either the end of April or sometime in early to mid-May. So make sure you take the time to do that right now. I'd rather see you do it great in May, back off in June, and hit it hard again in July than actually miss May and start in June and July. I'd rather see you do that in between. What we choose to do is we want to hit it hard in May, plant buckwheat at the end of May, let the buckwheat act as a smother crop, build the soil, find organic matter, and then go back and terminate the buckwheat, plant our fall crops, and kill weeds at that time so that we have a good fall crop, then actually spraying all the time. So you can get one before, one after, and that's what we try to do so we can limit. But it's so critical that you do this and make sure that you take advantage of that in May because by June often it's too late. And number 3, trail cams on scrapes. So many people are putting trail cameras on food plot edges, on ag field edges, on mineral licks out in the open. But how about those big mature bucks that want to go on those same trails that you'll see them later in the fall, especially infrequently and random during the summer, But you want to have a mock scrape there. You want to be able to pattern those bucks when they walk by. Make sure that you have those bucks available. Develop your target buck inventory, and then certainly let those bucks develop a pattern of use on those mock scrapes right in front of your stand locations for later this fall, because if they're hit it semi-consistently, meaning once every 2 or 3 weeks, you get a picture of that buck wandering through and nosing a scrape in that location, you can bet he will be back in the fall. And that's a number one way to pattern that buck, because then you just need to know he's there in the fall, and then pick the right wind, pick those right days that I talk about in HuntCast from HuntWise. Make sure that you pick those great deer days to be out there and great HuntCast days to be out in the woods, and you'll be rewarded by that intel during the summertime. Even though you're putting cameras in locations you don't expect deer to be or bucks to be during the summertime consistently, those random looks at them, doesn't matter if it's public land or private land, will pay off big time when those bucks return to their fall core areas later on in the hunting season, and give you that opportunity that you've noticed infrequently all summer long that turns into very frequently and consistently during the fall. You'll be ready for them. And so that's why a lot of times I'm putting cameras out in locations right now to make sure my fall games on target during the summertime. Hope that makes sense. You can do that right now. You don't have to wait till the summertime. By the time you get into the fall, or wait till the fall, by the time you get into the fall and late summer, you should have a great idea of not only what's available, but where they're at, where they're generally cheating to, and certainly what stand locations that they favor on your land right in those mock scrapes. And again, when we're picking stand location during the summer, we're picking stand location, mock scrape, and where to hang a camera all at the same time, whether we put a camera there or not. We have that opportunity to, but we always put a mock scrape, especially in front of our bow stands, right in front of the stand, right where we expect to shoot a deer. That'll pay off big dividends, avoiding these fails and making sure you're on target with the deer chores that we put out each month, making sure that those deer hunting chores are completed. And again, we're putting a list out of what we're completing, but a lot of those are timing issues, so very important to follow some of those, and I talk about those that are timing issues, but very important that not only are you avoiding these deer fails, but you're on target with your deer hunting chores and getting a lot accomplished each month, because boy, it's going to be here before we know it. I know in probably 6 weeks, again, we'll be able to recognize bucks that we're waiting on for the fall, and then it's game on from there. It's only 3 months away from the season at that time. So we're looking forward to it. I hope you guys are staying on track and avoiding some of these common deer fails that can happen in the deer hunting world each and every month. Now, I don't know if you've checked out our main website lately, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, but we've really had a lot going on, including hats, books, our web class, and certainly our new seed company, WHS Wildlife Blends. When you click on seed on our site, it'll take you right to our brand new site for the seed company. We have all 12 blends available. So check it all out, though. I encourage you, I appreciate you checking it out. Whether you buy anything or not, really appreciate you visiting the site and seeing what's going on, and continue to watch, because we have big things coming later this year.